A dying mafia boss gives a beggar a black card, but when she saves his life, she discovers she's the only antidote to his poison. Now, as enemies close in, will she be his salvation, or will his obsession destroy them both? The bitter wind howled through the alley, cutting through Valeria's threadbare jacket like knives. She huddled deeper into the shadowy corner, pressing herself against the cold brick wall. Her stomach growled, a painful reminder that she hadn't eaten in 2 days. Heavy footsteps echoed off the walls, and her heart seized. A burly man emerged from the darkness, his yellowed teeth bared in a predatory grin. "Well, what do we have here?" Valeria's fingers curled around the few crumpled bills in her pocket, all she had left in the world. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I have nothing." The thug advanced, and she squeezed her eyes shut, too exhausted to run, too weak to fight. This was it. After everything she'd survived, this was how it would end. A sudden commotion erupted at the alley's entrance. The thug's footsteps faltered, and Valeria's eyes flew open. A man stumbled into view, clearly disoriented. Even in the dim light, she could see his expensive suit was torn and stained. He crashed against the wall, a pained groan escaping his lips. The thug disappeared into the shadows without another word. Whoever this new arrival was, he'd scared off her attacker with his mere presence. Valeria watched as the man slid down the wall, his breathing labored, his face contorted in agony, and she recognized the signs immediately: dilated pupils, cold sweat, trembling hands. Poison. Before she could stop herself, she crawled toward him. "Sir, can you hear me?" His dark eyes fixed on her, glazed with fever. "Isabella?" he mumbled. "No, I'm Valeria. You've been poisoned. There's an old clinic nearby. I can help you." He grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. "Why would you help me?" "Because I'm stupid, apparently," she muttered, pulling his arm over her shoulder. "Come on." Together they stumbled through the darkness to the abandoned clinic, where she sometimes sought shelter. She laid him on a dusty examination table, her medical training kicking in as she assessed his symptoms. "Damiano?" he gasped between painful breaths. "Damiano De Luca." Valeria's hands froze. Everyone knew that name, the most feared mafia boss in the city. She'd just invited death himself into her sanctuary. As she worked to stabilize him, his fevered gaze never left her face. He reached into his jacket with trembling fingers and pulled out a sleek black card. "Take it," he ordered, his voice weak but commanding. "I don't want." "Take it," he insisted, pressing it into her palm before his eyes rolled back and he lost consciousness. Valeria stared at the black card glinting in her hand, its surface as smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. Why would a dying mafia boss give this to her? She glanced at his unconscious form, his face finally peaceful in his unnatural sleep. Something told her that by helping him tonight, she'd signed away her freedom. But as she watched his chest rise and fall, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. The abandoned clinic's fluorescent lights flickered overhead as Valeria watched Damiano's chest rise and fall. His breathing was shallow, but at least it was steady. She'd managed to stabilize him with what little supplies she could find, but he needed more. Her fingers traced the edge of the black card he'd given her. It felt heavy, important, dangerous. After a moment's hesitation, she slipped out to a nearby convenience store. The cashier's eyes had nearly popped out when she'd handed over the black card. And suddenly everything she needed was available. When she returned, Damiano was exactly where she'd left him. His sculpted features tight with pain, even in unconsciousness. She cleaned his wounds properly this time, her medical training from what felt like a lifetime ago coming back naturally. Hours passed before his eyes snapped open. They were dark, dangerous, like staring into an abyss. "Where am I?" His voice was a growl, raw with pain and fury. He tried to sit up, but winced. "Don't move," Valeria said firmly. "You're still weak from the poison." His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. His grip was like iron despite his condition. "Who are you? Why am I still alive?" Valeria met his gaze steadily, refusing to show fear even as her heart hammered in her chest. "I'm the person who saved your life. You collapsed in the alley." Recognition flickered across his face. The beggar. His eyes narrowed. "What do you want?" "Nothing." He laughed, but it was a harsh sound. "Everyone wants something." He reached into his jacket, pulled out a thick wad of cash. "Take it and forget you ever saw me." Valeria stepped back, shaking her head. "I didn't help you for money. You needed help, so I helped. It's that simple. Nothing is ever simple." His voice dropped lower, more threatening. He pulled out his phone, dialed with one hand. "Find her. I want everything." But Valeria was already moving. She'd survived on these streets long enough to know when to run. She slipped out the back door, into the maze of alleys she knew better than anyone. As she ran, her hand touched the black card still in her pocket. She should have thrown it away, but something made her keep it. Whatever game fate was playing, she had a feeling it was just beginning. Behind her, she could hear voices, men searching. Damiano De Luca wasn't going to let her disappear easily, but for now, at least, she was free. She just couldn't shake the feeling that her life had shifted irreversibly. The way he'd looked at her like she was a puzzle he needed to solve, a threat he needed to contain, told her this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The black card felt heavy in Valeria's trembling hands as she traced the engraved symbol with her fingertip. The De Luca family crest, a serpent, wrapped around a dagger, caught the dim streetlight, its metallic surface gleaming with deadly promise. She'd heard whispers about these cards on the streets. They meant power, protection, and a bottomless pit of money. They also meant trouble. Her worn shoes scraped against the pavement as she paced, the weight of her decision pressing down on her chest. The rational part of her mind screamed to throw the card away and run, but after years of sleeping in abandoned buildings and scrounging for meals, the temptation was too strong to resist. "Just one night," she whispered to herself. "One night in a real bed." The Ritz-Carlton's golden doors opened silently as she stepped into the marble lobby. The receptionist's eyes widened at her appearance, the threadbare coat, the tangled hair. But the moment she placed the black card on the counter, everything changed. "Of course, Miss Valeria. We have our finest suite available." She had barely signed the registration card when she felt it. The shift in the air, the sudden tension that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. Two men in black suits materialized beside her, their presence radiating quiet menace. "Miss," the taller one said, his voice low and controlled. "Mr. De Luca requests your presence at his estate." Her heart slammed against her ribs. "I'm not going anywhere." The shorter man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "This isn't a request. The boss doesn't make requests." Valeria's fingers curled into fists. She'd known, deep down, that using the card would lead to this. The black card wasn't a gift, it was a leash. 20 minutes later, she stood before massive iron gates, staring up at a mansion that looked more like a fortress. Italian cypress trees lined the curved driveway, their shadows stretching like dark fingers across manicured lawns. The gates creaked open, a sound that felt too much like a cage door closing. "Welcome to the De Luca estate," one of the men said. But Valeria barely heard him. She took her first step forward, the gravel crunching beneath her feet. Each step carried her deeper into Damiano's world, and somewhere in the pit of her stomach she knew there would be no turning back. The mansion loomed ahead, its windows gleaming like hungry eyes in the darkness, waiting to swallow her whole. The marble floors echoed with Valeria's footsteps as she entered Damiano De Luca's mansion. Her worn shoes felt out of place against the gleaming surface, each step a reminder of the world she was leaving behind. The guard led her through corridors dripping with wealth, crystal chandeliers, priceless artwork, and gilded mirrors that reflected her disheveled appearance back at her. Her heart pounded as they approached massive double doors. The guard pushed them open, revealing a study that screamed power and privilege. Dark wood paneling covered the walls, and leather-bound books lined floor-to-ceiling shelves. Damiano sat behind an imposing desk, his presence filling the room like smoke. His dark eyes pinned her in place, studying her with cold calculation. The poison might have weakened his body, but his gaze was sharp as ever. "Sit!" he commanded, gesturing to the chair across from him. Valeria lifted her chin and remained standing. "I prefer to stand." His jaw tightened. That wasn't a request. Slowly, she lowered herself into the chair, keeping her eyes locked on his. "Why am I here?" "You tell me," he said, leaning forward. "Why did you save my life? What's your angle?" "I don't have an angle," she shot back. "I helped because you needed it. That's all." He laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "Nobody does anything without expecting something in return, especially not in my world. I'm not from your world." "You are now." His words fell like stones between them. "You saved my life. That makes you mine." Valeria's hands gripped the armrests. "I don't belong to anyone. Look around you," he said, spreading his arms. "My men are, everywhere. There's nowhere for you to run. You'll stay here, under my protection, where I can keep an eye on you." "No," she said, standing up. "I won't be your prisoner." In an instant, he was around the desk, towering over her. His presence surrounded her, masculine and dangerous. She could smell his expensive cologne, feel the heat radiating from his body. "You don't understand," he said, his voice dropping to a low rumble that made her shiver. "You'll never escape me. You saved me. Now, you belong to me." Valeria's heart thundered in her chest, fear mixing with something else, something that made her breath catch and her skin tingle. She wanted to run, but his dark eyes held her captive, promising danger and something far more terrifying: protection, possession, and a future she couldn't begin to imagine. The night wrapped around the mansion like a velvet shroud, but inside Damiano's bedroom, Valeria couldn't escape the harsh reality of his condition. His normally commanding presence had been reduced to something almost human, almost vulnerable. Almost. She dabbed the sweat from his forehead, trying not to notice how his jaw clenched with each wave of pain. Even in his weakened state, he radiated danger. "Tell me about the poison," she said, keeping her voice steady. "I need to know what we're dealing with if you expect me to help." Damiano's dark eyes fixed on her face. "It's rare, ancient, the kind of thing that shouldn't exist anymore." His words came out rough, like gravel. "My enemies got creative. And the antidote? There isn't one, not a conventional one." He grabbed her wrist, his grip still strong despite his condition. "Only the rarest blood type in the world can counteract it. AB negative with a specific protein marker." Valeria's heart stopped. She'd learned about this during her medical internship before everything fell apart, before the streets became her home. She'd been tested then, marked as special because of her unique blood type. "Let go of me," she whispered, pulling her hand away. Understanding dawned in his eyes. He saw it in her face before she could hide it. "You know something. I don't owe you anything. Don't you?" His laugh was harsh. "You used my black card. You're in my home. You're already mine, whether you like it or not." She stood up, backing away from the bed. "I'm not yours. I'm not anyone's." "Your blood type," he said, his voice dropping dangerously low. "Tell me." The silence stretched between them like a rubber band about to snap. Finally, she spoke. AB negative, with the marker. Damiano's eyes darkened with triumph. Then, you're not just mine now, Valeria. You're my salvation. She felt the walls closing in, knowing there was no escape. Not anymore. With trembling hands, she reached for the medical kit on the bedside table. "Fine," she said, pulling out a sterile needle. "But this doesn't make me yours. This makes us even." As she pricked her finger, watching the first drop of blood well up, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was signing away more than just her blood. She was signing away her freedom. "You'll be fine," she muttered to herself, not sure if she was talking to him or herself. Damiano watched her with those predator's eyes, and even in his weakened state, she could feel the weight of his possessions settling around her like chains. This was just the beginning, and they both knew it. The days blurred together in Damiano's mansion as Valeria continued her role as his reluctant caretaker. Each morning, she drew her blood, watching it drip into the vials that would keep him alive. Each evening, she checked his vitals, trying to ignore how her skin tingled whenever their eyes met. Today was different. The mansion buzzed with activity as staff prepared for a formal dinner. Valeria stood in front of the mirror in her assigned room, barely recognizing herself in the black designer dress Damiano had ordered for her. Her fingers traced the silky material, remembering the cardboard box she'd called home just days ago. "The guests are arriving." His deep voice startled her. Damiano stood in the doorway, cutting an imposing figure in his tailored suit. His dark eyes traveled over her slowly, possessively. "I shouldn't be here," Valeria said, turning away from his intense gaze. "I don't belong in this world." "You're exactly where you belong." He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne. "By my side." The dinner was a blur of fake smiles and calculated conversations. Valeria sat at Damiano's right hand, feeling the weight of curious stares from the other guests. Every time she shifted uncomfortably, his hand would find its way to her knee under the table, both a warning and a claim. She noticed how the others feared him, how conversations died when he spoke, but she also caught the slight tremor in his hand as he lifted his wine glass, a reminder that he wasn't as invincible as he seemed, that he needed her. The air in the dining room grew suffocating. When she couldn't take it anymore, Valeria slipped away to the garden, gulping in the cool night air. The roses swayed gently in the breeze, their thorns gleaming in the moonlight. She heard his footsteps before she felt his presence behind her. "Running away?" His voice was soft but carried an edge of steel. "Just breathing," she replied, not turning around. He moved closer, his chest almost touching her back. "Don't try to run," he warned, his breath warm against her neck. "You're mine now." Valeria's heart hammered in her chest, but she lifted her chin defiantly. "I don't belong to anyone." His laugh was low and dangerous. "That's where you're wrong, little savior." His hand came to rest on her shoulder, heavy and warm. "The moment you saved my life, you sealed your fate." They stood there in the moonlit garden, trapped in a dance of attraction and resistance, neither willing to give in first. The roses watched silently, their thorns. A reminder that sometimes the most beautiful things could draw blood. The mansion's walls felt like they were closing in on Valeria. She paced the length of her luxurious prison, running her fingers along the expensive wallpaper. A week had passed since she'd first saved Damiano's life, but it felt like years. The weight of his constant surveillance pressed down on her shoulders. From her window, she watched his men patrol the grounds, their dark suits stark against the manicured lawns. They moved like shadows, always watching, always ready. Her fingers traced the cool glass, seeking an escape that didn't exist. "Planning your exit strategy?" Damiano's voice cut through the silence. Valeria spun around. He stood in the doorway, looking deceptively casual in his tailored shirt and slacks. but there was nothing casual about the way his dark eyes tracked her every movement. "I'm not a prisoner," she said, lifting her chin. His laugh was cold. "No? Then try leaving." Before she could respond, one of his men burst into the room. "Boss, we've got trouble. The Antonino family. They're making moves." Damiano's face hardened. "What kind of moves? They know about your condition. They're planning something big." Valeria watched as Damiano's jaw clenched. The poison was still in his system, weakening him day by day. Only her blood kept him alive, and they both knew it. "Get out," he ordered his man. Once they were alone, he turned to Valeria. "You're not going anywhere. Not now. I can't stay here forever," she argued, moving toward the door. "I'm not part of your world." His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. "You became part of my world the moment you saved my life." She yanked her arm free and ran. Down the hallway, past the guards, through the garden. Her heart pounded as she approached the gates. Freedom was so close, a shot rang out. Damiano tackled her to the ground as bullets sprayed overhead. An assassin had breached the property. Everything happened in a blur. Despite his weakened state, Damiano moved with lethal precision. He drew his weapon and fired 3 times. The assassin fell, dead before he hit the ground. Valeria lay in the grass, trembling. Damiano's body still covered hers, his breath harsh against her neck. She could feel his heart racing, matching her own frantic rhythm. Slowly, he pulled back, his eyes scanning her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, unable to look away from the dead man nearby. "You saved me, and you saved me." His voice was rough. "We're even now." But they weren't even. Not really. As Damiano helped her to her feet, Valeria realized she was bound to him by something stronger than debt or obligation. The way he held her, protective yet possessive, told her everything she needed to know. She was trapped in his world now, caught between fear and an attraction she couldn't deny. And as his enemies closed in, she knew things were only going to get more dangerous. "Come," he said, leading her back to the mansion. "You need to stay close to me." This time, she didn't resist. The outside world suddenly seemed more threatening than the gilded cage he'd built around her. At least here, in his dark kingdom, she knew exactly who held the power over her life. And maybe, just maybe, she was starting to want him to. The morning sun filtered through heavy curtains, casting long shadows across Damiano's private quarters. Valeria paced the opulent room, her footsteps muffled by the plush carpet. After last night's attack, the mansion felt like both a sanctuary and a prison. "You're not leaving this room without my men present." Damiano's voice cut through the silence. He stood by the doorway, his broad shoulders blocking any thought of escape. "The rival family knows about you now. They'll use you to get to me." Valeria crossed her arms. "I can take care of myself. I survived on the streets, remember?" A muscle twitched in his jaw. "This isn't the streets. These people will torture you just to hear me scream." His words sent a chill down her spine, but she refused to show fear. Throughout the day, she noticed his men everywhere. In the hallways, outside her windows, at every corner of the massive estate. Their presence was suffocating, but not as much as Damiano's constant attention. His dark eyes followed her every move, watching her like a predator guarding its prey. By dinner time, the tension between them had built to an unbearable level. They sat at opposite ends of the long dining table, the space between them charged with unspoken words. A few of Damiano's associates had joined them, including Marco, a younger captain who kept stealing glances at Valeria. "Such a pretty thing," Marco mumbled, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Boss, where did you find this one?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Damiano's hand gripped his wine glass so tight, Valeria thought it might shatter. He rose slowly from his chair, and the room fell deadly silent. His footsteps echoed as he moved behind her chair. His hand came down on her shoulder, fingers digging in possessively. "She's not for anyone else," he growled, his voice carrying a promise of violence. "Look at her again, Marco, and I'll carve out your eyes." Valeria sat frozen, her heart hammering in her chest. She wasn't sure what frightened her more, the casual threat of violence, or the way her body responded to his touch, sending warmth spreading through her despite her fear. Marco paled and quickly looked away. Damiano's grip on her shoulder remained, a constant reminder of her new reality. She was his now, whether she wanted to be or not. And the scariest part was, she wasn't sure if she wanted to fight it anymore. Valeria's footsteps echoed through the marble hallway as she stormed away from Damiano's study. Her hands shook with anger, and tears of frustration threatened to spill from her eyes. His arrogance, his need to control every aspect of her life, suffocating. "Where do you think you're going?" His deep voice carried down the corridor, making her spine stiffen. She didn't stop. The cool night air hit her face as she pushed through the French doors into the garden. The roses were in full bloom, their sweet scent a stark contrast to the bitterness in her mouth. Heavy footsteps followed her. Of course, he wouldn't let her have even this moment alone. "I'm talking to you, Valeria." His voice was closer now, dangerous and low. She spun around, her eyes flashing. "I don't answer to you, Damiano. I'm not one of your men you can order around." In 3 long strides, he closed the distance between them. His presence overwhelmed her, all dark suit and barely contained power. "Everything in this house answers to me, including you. I saved your life." She spat. "That doesn't make me your property." His hand shot out, gripping her arm. Not enough to hurt, but enough to hold her in place. "No," he growled, "but this does." Before she could respond, his mouth crashed onto hers. The kiss wasn't gentle. It was pure possession, raw need and pent-up frustration. His lips moved against hers with desperate intensity, and despite everything her mind screamed, her body responded. Her hands fisted in his shirt, whether to push him away or pull him closer, she wasn't sure. He tasted like expensive whiskey and danger, and it made her head spin. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. His dark eyes burned into hers, filled with something that looked like triumph. "Feel that?" His thumb brushed across her lower lip. "That's why you can't run from me. That's why you belong to me now." Valeria's heart hammered against her ribs. She wanted to deny it, to fight back. But the heat coursing through her veins made lies impossible. She was falling into his darkness, and the scariest part was that she wasn't sure she wanted to stop. Through bleary morning light, Valeria stood at the window of Damiano's mansion, her fingers tracing patterns on the cold glass. The kiss from last night still burned on her lips, a reminder of the dangerous line she was walking. She felt his presence before she heard him. Damiano lingered in the doorway, his dark eyes following her every move. The silence stretched between them like a rubber band ready to snap. "Your clothes are inadequate," he said finally, his voice clipped. "I've arranged for a stylist." Valeria turned, crossing her arms. "I don't need your charity." A muscle twitched in his jaw. "It's not charity. Everything you wear reflects on me now." The words stung more than they should have. She watched as he strode across the room, his movements precise and controlled. He kept his distance, but his energy filled the space between them. Throughout the day, expensive packages arrived: dresses, shoes, jewelry. Each one felt like another chain binding her to him. Yet when she caught him watching her at dinner, something in his gaze seemed almost gentle. "Tell me about your family," she said suddenly, surprising them both. His face hardened. "There's nothing to tell. There's always something." Silence fell again, heavy and thick. Then, so quietly she almost missed it, he spoke. "I was 8 When my father first made me watch him kill someone." Valeria's breath caught. The pain in his voice was raw, unexpected. "He said it would make me strong." Damiano's fingers tightened around his glass. "Instead, it made me." "Like him?" Valeria whispered. His eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw past the monster to the wounded boy beneath. "I wasn't always this way," he said roughly. You make me want to change, but I don't know how." The confession hung in the air between them. Valeria's heart thundered in her chest as she realized the weight of his words and the dangerous position they put her in. She might be the only person who could reach the humanity left in him, but at what cost to herself? She turned back to the window, seeing their reflections overlapped in the glass, the dangerous man and the woman who might save him or be destroyed, trying. The morning light crept through the heavy curtains, casting shadows across Valeria's face as she stirred from sleep. Her eyes fluttered open to find Damiano's intense gaze fixed on her. He sat in a leather armchair beside the bed, his presence both unsettling and magnetic. "You watch me sleep now?" she asked, pulling the silk sheets closer to her chest. His lips curved into a dangerous smile. "I watch everything that belongs to me." The words should have angered her, but instead, they sent a shiver down her spine. In the soft morning light, his usual hardness seemed somehow softer, more human. The dark circles under his eyes spoke of sleepless nights, and for a moment, she glimpsed the wounded man beneath the monster. "Get dressed," he ordered, standing up. "You're coming with me to a family meeting." Valeria's stomach tightened. "I'm not family. You're what I say you are." His voice left no room for argument. An hour later, she found herself seated beside Damiano in a room full of dangerous men. His brother Marco sat across from them, his eyes cold and calculating as they swept over her. "You're getting soft, brother," Marco sneered. "Keeping a stray like her around? What happened to the ruthless Damiano we all know?" Valeria felt Damiano tense beside her. His hand gripped the armrest so hard his knuckles turned white. "Watch your mouth," Damiano growled, his voice deadly quiet. Marco laughed. "Or what? You'll—" Before he could finish, Damiano was on his feet. The tension in the room crackled like electricity before a storm. Valeria reached out, touching his arm. "Damiano," she whispered, surprised by her own boldness. He turned to her, his eyes wild with rage. Then, without warning, he grabbed her waist and pulled her against him. His lips crashed into hers, brutal and possessive. The kiss wasn't gentle. It was a statement, a claim of ownership in front of his family. When he finally released her, she stumbled back, breathless and confused. "Take her to my room," he ordered one of his men. "Make sure she stays there." Back in his suite, Valeria locked herself in the bathroom, her heart pounding. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, flushed cheeks, swollen lips, wide eyes. The woman looking back at her was someone she barely recognized. "I can't stay away from you," she whispered to her reflection, touching her lips where she could still feel his kiss. The truth of those words terrified her more than any threat he'd ever made. Behind the bathroom door, she heard his heavy footsteps enter the bedroom. She closed her eyes, knowing that sooner or later she'd have to face him, and the undeniable pull between them that grew stronger with each passing day. The morning sun filtered through the heavy curtains of Damiano's study as Valeria watched him work. Her fingers traced the edge of the black leather chair she sat in, her mind spinning with questions she'd been too afraid to ask. "Tell me about your empire," she said finally, breaking the silence. Damiano's pen stopped moving across the paper. He looked up at her, his dark eyes narrowing. "Why do you want to know?" "Because I'm here, aren't I? Trapped in your world. I should at least understand it." He leaned back in his chair, studying her face. The silence stretched between them until he finally spoke. "It's not a pretty story." I'm not looking for pretty. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. No, you never are. He stood up, walking to the window. My father built this empire on blood and broken bones. I made it stronger the same way. As he talked, Valeria found herself drawn into the dark tale of power, betrayal, and survival. The DeLuca family's grip on the city was absolute, built through decades of calculated violence and strategic alliances. You make it sound so cold, she said. That's because it is. He turned to face her. This world doesn't allow for warmth. Valeria stood up, moving closer to him. Her eyes caught sight of something she hadn't noticed before. A long scar peeking out from his collar. Without thinking, she reached out to touch it. Damiano caught her wrist, his grip tight. Don't! Who did that to you? Someone who thought they could take what was mine. His voice was ice. They learned their lesson. Is that what you tell yourself to justify the violence? That it's all about protecting what's yours? In one swift motion, he had her pinned against the wall, his body caging her in. You have no idea what I've had to do to survive, he growled. If you knew the truth, you wouldn't stand here judging me. But Valeria saw past his anger. She saw the pain in his eyes, the weight of years of violence and loneliness. Her hand came up to touch his face. And this time, he didn't stop her. I'm not judging you, she whispered. I'm trying to understand you. The anger in his eyes flickered, replaced by something more vulnerable. For a moment, they stood there, caught in the tension between violence and tenderness, between judgment and understanding. Finally, Damiano stepped back, running a hand through his hair, but Valeria had seen it. The crack in his armor, the glimpse of the man beneath the monster, and somehow that made him even more dangerous to her heart. Passed since she'd first stepped into Damiano's world, and the weight of danger pressed heavier with each passing day. His men watched her constantly, their dark suits and watchful eyes a reminder that she was both protected and trapped. She paused at a window, staring out at the manicured gardens below. The beauty of the estate felt like a gilded cage, especially now that she knew what lurked beneath the surface. Every shadow could hide an enemy. Every corner could conceal a threat. The sound of raised voices drew her attention. She crept closer to Damiano's study, where the door stood slightly ajar. They found Marco this morning. A man's voice trembled. In pieces. Valeria's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. Where? Damiano's voice was ice cold. Outside his apartment. The rival family left their mark. Something crashed against the wall. Valeria jumped back as Damiano's roar filled the hallway. Find them! I want every one of those bastards dead by sunrise. Her heart hammering, Valeria turned to flee, but she wasn't fast enough. The door flew open, and Damiano's dark eyes locked onto her. In 3 long strides, he reached her, his hands gripping her shoulders. You shouldn't be here, he growled, but his touch was gentle as he pulled her into the study. It's not safe anymore. It was never safe, she shot back, trying to ignore how his proximity made her pulse race. Your enemies will die before they touch you. His fingers traced her jawline, possessive and tender at once. You're mine to protect. The word protect sounded too much like possess. Valeria pulled away, needing space to breathe. I can't live like this, Damiano. Always watching, always afraid. His eyes darkened. Then run. She made it 3 steps toward the door before his men appeared, blocking her path. Damiano's laugh was without humor. See, you can't escape me. Not now, not ever. Later that night, as Valeria lay in her bed, gunshots shattered the silence. She bolted upright as her bedroom door burst open. A masked figure lunged for her, but Damiano appeared like a demon from the shadows. The fight was brutal and swift. Blood sprayed across the cream-colored walls as Damiano's knife found its mark. When it was over, he turned to her, his shirt stained red. "Are you hurt?" Valeria shook her head, trembling. You killed him. I told you." He moved closer, his blood-streaked hand cupping her face. "I'll kill anyone who threatens what's mine." Looking into his eyes, Valeria saw both monster and protector, and realized with startling clarity that she couldn't walk away anymore. She was bound to him, not just by circumstance, but by something deeper and more dangerous. "You really would kill anyone who threatens me, wouldn't you?" she whispered, equal parts terrified and awed. Damiano's eyes darkened to obsidian. "Anyone." The word hung between them like a promise and a threat, and Valeria knew she'd never be free again. The mansion felt different after the attack. Valeria paced the length of Damiano's private study, her fingers trailing along the leather-bound books that lined the shelves. Everything about this place screamed wealth and power, but now it felt more like a gilded cage than ever. Damiano watched her from his desk, his dark eyes following her every move. The cut on his cheek from the fight was still fresh, a stark reminder of how close they'd both come to death. "Stop pacing," he ordered, his voice low and controlled. "You're safe here." Valeria turned to face him, crossing her arms. "Am I? Because it seems like being near you is what put me in danger in the first place." Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe regret, before his expression hardened again. He stood up slowly, his movements deliberate as he approached her. "You want to know why I am the way I am?" Her heart raced as he drew closer. She held her ground, even as he towered over her. "I loved once," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Her name was Isabella. She was beautiful, innocent, like you." His jaw clenched. "She was also working for my enemies. The night I found out, I had to watch her try to kill my brother." Valeria's breath caught in her throat. "What happened to her?" Damiano's eyes grew distant. "I did what I had to do. That's when I learned. Trust is a luxury I can't afford." He reached out, his fingers grazing her cheek. "But you're different. You saved my life when you had nothing to gain." "I'm not her," Valeria said firmly, even as she fought the urge to lean into his, a touch. "And I won't be controlled just because you're afraid of being betrayed again." His hand dropped to her throat, not squeezing, just resting there, a reminder of his power. "No, you won't be controlled. You'll stay because you want to." His thumb traced her pulse point. "Because deep down, you feel this too." Valeria tried to step back, but found herself pressed against the bookshelf. "You can't keep me here forever." "I can," he said simply. "And I will." He leaned in, his lips brushing her forehead in an unexpectedly gentle kiss. "You're mine, Valeria. There's no turning back." She closed her eyes, knowing he was right. With every passing day, every stolen touch, every moment of vulnerability between them, she was falling deeper into his world. The scariest part wasn't that she couldn't escape, it was that she wasn't sure she wanted to anymore. The mahogany doors to Damiano's study swung open, revealing a room filled with the most dangerous men in the city. Heavy cigar smoke hung in the air like a warning, mixing with the scent of expensive cologne and barely concealed violence. Valeria's stomach churned as she took her place in the corner, feeling every eye in the room assess her presence. Damiano sat at the head of the long table, his dark suit impeccable, his presence commanding absolute attention. His fingers drummed once against the polished wood before he spoke, and the room fell into immediate silence. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice deceptively soft, "we seem to have a problem with respect these days." Valeria watched as he detailed the recent attacks, the threats, the growing boldness of their rivals. His words were measured, but there was steel beneath them. When one of his captains interrupted, Damiano's eyes flashed dangerously. "Did I give you permission to speak?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The captain's face went white. "No, boss, I apologize." Valeria's heart hammered against her ribs. This was the side of Damiano she'd been trying to ignore, the ruthless mafia boss who could make grown men tremble with just a look. Yet she couldn't deny the odd flutter in her stomach when he commanded the room with such effortless authority. After the meeting, when the last associate had hurried out, Valeria couldn't hold back anymore. "How can you be so cold?" she demanded. "Those men, you treated them like they were nothing." Damiano's movement was lightning fast. His hand closed around her wrist, yanking her against his chest. His breath was hot against her ear. "You have no idea what it takes to survive in my world," he growled. The grip on her wrist wasn't painful, but it was firm enough to remind her of his strength. His cologne filled her senses, making her head spin. "I don't want to be part of your world," she whispered. But even to her own ears, the words lacked conviction. He released her slowly, his dark eyes boring into hers. "You already are," he said, his voice cold and final. "Whether you want it or not." Valeria rubbed her wrist, trying to ignore how her skin tingled where he'd touched her. She knew he was right. She was in too deep now. The scariest part wasn't his world of violence and power, it was how much a part of her wanted to stay in it. With him, the morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Damiano's mansion as he led Valeria to his waiting car. Her heart pounded against her ribs, not from fear this time, but from the way his hand rested possessively on the small of her back. "Where are we going?" she asked, watching the city blur past the tinted windows. "Somewhere private." His voice was low, dangerous. "Somewhere we won't be interrupted." The car wound its way up into the hills, finally stopping at a secluded villa overlooking the city. Inside, everything dripped with luxury. Crystal chandeliers, priceless art, Italian marble. But it felt like another gilded cage. Damiano's eyes never left her as she moved through the space. "Do you like it?" "It's beautiful," Valeria admitted. "But we both know this isn't about showing me somewhere nice." His jaw tightened. "No, it's not." They settled onto a balcony overlooking sprawling gardens. A servant brought coffee, then disappeared silently. The tension between them crackled like electricity before a storm. "The doctor called this morning," Damiano said finally. "About the poison." Valeria's stomach dropped. "What did he say?" "That without regular treatments using your blood type, the poison could return. Worse than before." His knuckles whitened around his coffee cup. "You're my lifeline now, Valeria, my only chance at survival." "I didn't ask for this," she whispered. Neither did I." He set down his cup and moved closer, his presence overwhelming. "But here we are. You saved my life that night in the alley. Now we're bound together whether you like it or not." Her heart raced as he reached out, running his fingers along her jaw. "You'll never be free of me now, Piccola. Your blood is my salvation." Valeria closed her eyes, guilt and something darker coiling in her chest. She had saved him that night out of basic human decency. Now that choice had trapped her in his world forever. "You saved me," she murmured. "Now I save you. But at what cost?" His only answer was to pull her closer, his lips brushing her ear. "Whatever the cost, you're mine now, forever." The weight of those words settled over her like chains. She was his antidote, his cure, but she was also his prisoner. And deep down, a part of her was starting to crave those chains. The mansion's walls seemed to close in around Valeria with each passing day. A week had crawled by since the blood-type revelation, and Damiano's presence had become an overwhelming constant. He appeared everywhere in doorways, behind her in hallways, his dark gaze following her every move, like a predator stalking its prey. Tonight was no different. She sat in the library, pretending to read while actually watching his reflection in the window. He lounged in a leather armchair, his usual glass of whiskey in hand, jacket discarded to reveal a crisp white shirt that did little to hide his muscled frame. "You're staring," he said, not looking up from his phone. Valeria's cheeks burned. "I was just thinking." "About running?" His voice carried that dangerous edge she'd come to know too well. "About you, actually." The words slipped out before she could stop them. That got his attention. He set down his phone, dark eyes locking onto hers with frightening intensity. "Tell me." Valeria shifted in her seat, uncomfortable with his scrutiny. "You're different when we're alone like this." "Less." "Monstrous?" His lips curved into a bitter smile. "Human," she corrected softly. "You let your guard down, just a little." Damiano stood, moving toward her with predatory grace. He stopped behind her chair, hands coming to rest on her shoulders. His touch sent shivers down her spine, equal parts fear and something else she didn't want to name. "Do you want to know why?" His fingers traced lazy circles on her collarbone. "Because you've seen the worst of me, and you're still here. Still fighting. Still." He leaned down, his breath hot against her ear. "Still looking at me like I might be worth saving." Valeria's heart hammered in her chest. "I'm here because you won't let me leave." "Are you?" His grip tightened slightly. "Tell me you don't feel this thing between us. Tell me you don't think about me when I'm not around." She couldn't lie not to him, not anymore. The past week had worn down her defenses, shown her glimpses of the man beneath the monster. She'd seen his scars, heard stories of betrayal that made her heart ache despite herself. "You're the only person who's ever made me feel human again," he confessed, voice rough with emotion. "I don't know if I can let you go, Valeria." The words hung heavy in the air between them. Valeria's throat tightened, her response dying on her lips. Because how could she tell him that despite everything, despite the violence, the control, the darkness of his world, she wasn't sure she wanted to leave anymore? Instead, she reached up, her fingers brushing against his hand on her shoulder. It was the smallest gesture, but she felt him freeze, felt the sharp intake of his breath. In that moment, the walls between them crumbled just a little more, and the scariest part was how right it felt. The whispers followed Valeria through the mansion's hallways like ghosts. She'd learned to read the air in Damiano's world, the slight tensing of his men's shoulders, the way conversations died when she entered a room. Something was wrong. She found herself watching more carefully now, noting the frequent meetings behind closed doors, the way Damiano's jaw would clench when his phone buzzed. His empire was shifting, and she could feel the tremors beneath her feet. His brother, Antonio, was the worst. She'd catch him staring at her with cold calculation, as if measuring the worth of her blood against the trouble she brought. This morning, she overheard him in Damiano's study. "She's a liability," Antonio hissed. "Everyone knows she's your weakness now." "Enough." Damiano's voice cut through the air like a blade. "She stays." Valeria pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering. She shouldn't have been surprised when Damiano found her there moments later, his dark eyes blazing. "Come here," he commanded, and she felt herself drawn to him despite her fear. His hands were gentle as they cupped her face, but his words were steel. "Nobody will touch you. I've killed for less." Later that evening, as she walked through the garden trying to clear her head, a shadow detached itself from the hedges. Valeria froze, her blood turning to ice. "Don't scream," the figure said softly. "I'm here to help you." The stranger was well dressed, elegant clearly from another family. "We can protect you from him, get you out of this life. All you need to do is help us in return." Valeria's throat went dry. "Help you how?" "Information. Access. Small things." The stranger's smile was kind, but their eyes were cold. "Think about it. You know where to find me." That night, As she lay in bed listening to Damiano's steady breathing beside her, Valeria stared at the ceiling. The choice before her felt impossible. Stay with the devil, she knew, the one who'd marked her soul with his darkness, or risk everything for freedom. She turned to look at Damiano's sleeping face, usually so harsh in waking hours but now softened by sleep. Her fingers traced the air above his cheek, not quite touching. "I have to choose," she whispered into the darkness, even as her heart screamed its protest. She already knew the truth she was in too deep, and choices were luxury she might no longer have. The mansion creaked around her, full of secrets and shadows, while Damiano's empire teetered on the edge of chaos. And Valeria, caught between love and survival, wondered if there was any choice that wouldn't end in blood. Valeria lay awake in her bed, the moonlight casting long shadows across the luxurious sheets that still felt foreign against her skin. The mysterious figure's offer echoed in her mind, tormenting her with promises of freedom. But was freedom worth betraying Damiano? Morning came too quickly. She avoided his gaze at breakfast, pushing food around her plate, her stomach in knots. But Damiano wasn't a man who missed details. His dark eyes tracked her every movement, reading the tension in her shoulders, the way she wouldn't meet his stare. "Something's troubling you." His voice cut through the silence like a blade. Valeria's hand trembled as she set down her fork. "I need to tell you something." Damiano leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Then tell me." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. She told him everything about the mysterious figure, the offer of protection, the promise of escape. With each word, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Damiano's face remained perfectly still, but his eyes hardened to obsidian. When he finally spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. "If you want to leave, you can try." He pushed back from the table, prowling toward her like a predator. "But you won't get far." "That's not—" Valeria started, but her words died in her throat as he gripped her arms, pulling her to her feet. "Did you think about taking their offer?" His fingers dug into her skin. "Did you think about betraying me?" "I'm telling you about it, aren't I?" She shot back, refusing to show fear despite her racing heart. Something flickered in his eyes, possession, need, and something darker. He yanked her against his chest, one hand tangling in her hair. "You belong to me, Valeria." His breath was hot against her ear. "I don't care who else comes for you. I will burn the world down before I let them take you." Valeria shuddered in his grip, not from fear but from the raw intensity of his words. In that moment, she knew her choice was made. She might not understand what the future held, but she understood one thing: she was his, completely and irrevocably. Whether that was her salvation or her damnation remained to be seen. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered, and felt his grip tighten in response. His kiss was brutal, claiming, a reminder of who she belonged to. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with promise. "No," he agreed. "You're not." The sleek black car glided through the city's shadowy streets, its tinted windows concealing the power that lurked within. Valeria sat beside Damiano, her heart racing as his hand rested possessively on her thigh. The weight of his touch burned through her dress, a constant reminder of who she belonged to now. "Remember." Damiano's voice cut through the silence, low and dangerous. "Don't speak unless spoken to. These people would kill you just to hurt me." Valeria nodded, studying, his sharp profile in the dim light. His jaw was set, eyes focused ahead with deadly intensity. She'd seen that look before, right before he'd put a bullet in someone's head. The car pulled up to an exclusive restaurant, and Damiano's grip on her tightened. "Stay close," he ordered, his breath hot against her ear. Inside, the rival family's leader, Marco Rossi, waited at a private table. His smile didn't reach his eyes as they approached. Valeria felt Damiano's hand press against her lower back, guiding her to sit between him and the wall, protecting her while keeping her trapped. DeLuca, Marco drawled, his gaze lingering on Valeria. I see you've brought your antidote. Damiano's shoulders tensed. My woman isn't up for discussion, Rossi. Let's talk business. The meeting dripped with veiled threats and calculated moves. Valeria watched as Damiano dominated the conversation, his words sharp as knives. When Marco's hand drifted too close to his jacket pocket, Damiano's response was immediate. The click of his gun under the table was barely audible, but Marco's face drained of color. Think very carefully about your next move, Damiano warned, his voice eerily calm. Your wife would hate to become a widow. After the meeting, Damiano pulled Valeria into a dark alcove. His fingers traced her jaw, and she shivered at his touch. You see now? He murmured. This is what loving me means. Violence, power, control. I never wanted this life, Valeria whispered, even as she leaned into his touch. But you chose it the moment you saved me. His lips brushed against her temple. And now you're mine forever. On their way back to the mansion, gunshots shattered the night. Damiano moved with lethal grace, shoving Valeria down as he returned fire. 3 bodies hit the ground before she could even scream. Back in the safety of his car, Valeria stared at his blood-spattered suit. You saved me, she said quietly, her voice trembling. Damiano's dark eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. I'll always save you, Valeria, but don't mistake that for freedom. His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. You're mine. There's no escape from that now. Looking out at the city lights blurring past, Valeria knew he was right. She'd crossed a line she couldn't uncross. In saving Damiano's life, she'd sealed her own fate, bound forever to this dangerous man who would kill to keep her. And somehow, despite everything, she couldn't bring herself to want it any other way. The morning sun cast long shadows through the mansion's windows, but Valeria felt only emptiness in the vast space. Damiano's absence hung heavy in the air, and for the first time in weeks, she was truly alone. She traced her fingers along the luxurious silk sheets of her bed, contemplating the possibility of escape. Freedom was right there, tantalizingly close. But something kept her rooted in place, whether it was fear or something deeper, she couldn't tell anymore. The quiet morning shattered when Damiano returned. He appeared in her doorway, his usual pristine appearance marred by exhaustion. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his designer suit was slightly rumpled, signs of a battle she couldn't see but knew had taken place. Without warning, he crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. The gesture surprised her, so different from his usual calculated movements. His embrace was tight, desperate almost, as if he feared she might disappear. The threats are getting worse, he murmured against her hair, his voice unusually soft. I won't let them touch you. Valeria felt her heart twist. In that moment, she saw past the cruel Mafia boss to the man beneath, scarred, protective, and perhaps as trapped as she was in this dangerous world he'd built. But when she tried to step away, to clear her head with some fresh air, his softer side vanished. His hand shot out, wrapping around her wrist with familiar possessiveness. The grip wasn't painful, but it left no room for argument. Where do you think you're going? His voice had returned to its usual steel edge. Valeria met his gaze, her own strength rising to match his. I need space, Damiano. I need to think. Something flickered in his dark eyes. Fear, perhaps, or anger. After a long moment, his grip loosened, but his words carried a warning that sent shivers down her spine. You'll never be free of me. Don't forget that. She pulled away, her heart pounding as she walked toward the door. Each step felt heavy with the weight of their connection, the invisible chains that bound them together. As she reached the threshold, she paused, knowing that no matter what choice she made, there was no going back to who she was before him. The life she'd known was gone, replaced by this beautiful, terrible new reality where love and danger danced together in perfect, deadly harmony. Valeria sat at the edge of her bed in the luxurious room that had become her gilded cage. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the plush carpet, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The mansion had been too quiet, the air too thick with tension. Her phone buzzed, making her jump. The screen displayed a number she didn't recognize. When she answered, the voice on the other end sent chills down her spine. "Miss Valeria, I need you to listen carefully," the man said. "Marco, Damiano's right-hand man, has turned against him. The rival family is using you as leverage. They're coming for you tonight." Her heart pounded against her ribs. Before she could respond, the door burst open. Two of Damiano's men rushed in, their faces grim. "Boss's orders," one said, reaching for her arm. "We need to move you now." They whisked her through the mansion's corridors and into a waiting car. Through the tinted windows, she caught a glimpse of Damiano in the courtyard, his face twisted with a rage she'd never seen before. He was shouting orders, his men scrambling around him like worker bees around their queen. At the safe house, a modernist structure hidden in the outskirts of the city, Valeria paced the floor. Hours passed like molasses. When Damiano finally arrived, his presence filled the room with crackling energy. "Marco." He spat the name like poison. "That snake has been feeding information to Antonino's family for months." His fists clenched at his sides. "They think they can use you to bring me down." Valeria wrapped her arms around herself. "I never wanted this, Damiano. I never wanted to be caught in the middle of a war." He crossed the room in 3 long strides, his hands gripping her shoulders. "You've been in the middle of this war since the moment you saved my life." His eyes burned into hers. "There's no going back now." She tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. "Let me go, Damiano, please." "Never." His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "I will burn everything down to keep you safe. No one is taking you from me. No one." The possessiveness in his voice made her shiver. She looked up at him, seeing the monster and the man who would destroy worlds to protect what he considered his. And somehow, somewhere along the way, she had become his most precious possession. "Your world," she whispered. "It's consuming everything." "Our world now, Kara." His thumb traced her jawline. "You're as much a part of it as I am." In that moment, with his touch burning her skin and danger pressing in from all sides, Valeria realized there was no escaping the gravity of Damiano De Luca's orbit. She had become the heart of his dark empire, and the thought both terrified and thrilled her. The mansion's security alarms blared through the night, shattering the peaceful silence. Valeria's heart pounded as she heard gunshots echoing through the corridors. She knew this moment would come. The rival family had finally made their move. Heavy footsteps thundered down the hallway. Before she could react, the bedroom door burst open. 3 armed men stormed in, their faces covered in black masks. Valeria tried to run, but strong hands grabbed her arms, dragging her backward. "Let me go!" she screamed, struggling against their grip. "Shut up!" one of them growled, pressing a gun to her temple. "You're coming with us!" They hauled her through the mansion's once pristine halls, now marked with bullet holes and splattered with blood. She caught glimpses of bodies on the floor, Damiano's men, who had tried to protect her. "Damiano!" she called out desperately, but there was no answer. They shoved her into a black SUV, speeding away from the only place she'd felt safe. Through the tinted windows, she watched the mansion grow smaller until it disappeared into the darkness. At the rival family's compound, they locked her in a cold room with bare concrete walls. Hours passed like days. Every time the door opened, she expected to see Damiano, but it was always one of Antonino's men, bringing threats instead of salvation. "Your blood is the only thing keeping De Luca alive," Antonino sneered during one visit. "Once he's dead, you'll be free. Isn't that what you wanted?" Valeria spat in his face. "I'd rather die than help you kill him." The slap that followed left her ears ringing, but she didn't cry. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Just when hope started to fade, the compound erupted in chaos. Gunfire and screams filled the air. Then came the sound she'd been waiting for. Damiano's voice, cold with fury, cutting through the mayhem. Where is she? The door to her cell exploded inward. Damiano stood there, covered in blood that wasn't his own, his eyes wild with rage and relief when they found her. "Valeria," he breathed, crossing the room in 2 strides. She fell into his arms, breathing in his familiar scent of expensive cologne and gunpowder. "You came for me. I'll always come for you." His voice was rough with emotion. "I told you you're mine. Nobody takes what's mine." He lifted her chin, his eyes boring into hers. "I killed them all. Every single one who dared to touch you." Instead of feeling horrified, Valeria felt safe, protected, loved, in his dark, possessive way. "Take me home," she whispered against his chest. Damiano's arms tightened around her. "You are my home now, and I'm never letting you go again." As he led her out through the carnage he'd created to save her, Valeria finally accepted the truth she belonged in his world. With him, no matter how dark or dangerous it became, she was his, and he was hers. Forever. Thunder crackled outside the mansion's windows as Valeria paced in Damiano's study. Her heart still raced from the events of the past few hours, the memory of her captivity fresh in her mind. The door opened, and Damiano strode in, his presence filling the room with dangerous energy. His white shirt was stained with blood, but his eyes were focused only on her. Without a word, he crossed the room and pulled her into his arms, his grip fierce and possessive. "I thought I'd lost you," he growled against her hair. Valeria pressed her face into his chest, inhaling his scent, expensive cologne mixed with gunpowder. "You can't get rid of me that easily." He pulled back, his dark eyes searching her face. "This isn't over. The other families will try to use you against me. I won't let that happen again." "What are you going to do?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. She'd seen the ruthlessness in him when he'd torn through the rival family to save her. "Whatever it takes." His jaw clenched. "I'm going to destroy anyone who thinks they can take you from me." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the study. Valeria saw the determination in his eyes, the barely contained rage. This was the man she'd fallen for. Dangerous, possessive, but fiercely protective. "The other families need to understand," he continued, his voice low and deadly. "You're mine, and I protect what's mine." Valeria touched his face, feeling the tension in his jaw. "I know what that means, Damiano. I know what you'll have to do." He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "And you're ready for that? For the violence? The bloodshed?" She took a deep breath, remembering how it felt to be in the rival family's clutches, how Damiano had torn through hell itself to get to her. "I'm yours," she whispered. "Whatever comes with that, I accept it." A dangerous smile curved his lips. "Say it again." "I'm yours, Damiano. Completely yours." His grip tightened, and when he kissed her, it was with the same intensity that drove him to war, passionate, consuming, unstoppable. In that moment, Valeria knew there was no going back. She'd chosen this world, chosen him, with all the darkness that came with it. The storm raged outside, but in Damiano's arms she'd never felt safer. This was where she belonged, in the heart of his dangerous empire, loved by the most feared man in the city. And God help anyone who tried to tear them apart. The air in Damiano's study hung thick with tension, still heavy with the metallic scent of blood from the earlier battle. Valeria stood by the window, her fingers trembling as she traced the cold glass. Behind her, Damiano paced like a caged lion, his expensive shoes clicking against the hardwood floor. "Someone betrayed us," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "Someone close to you." Valeria's stomach twisted. The thought that someone she trusted had been working against them made her feel sick. She'd already lost so much of herself to this world, her freedom, her innocence. Now she was losing what little trust she had left. Damiano appeared behind her, his reflection in the window dark and imposing. His hands came to rest on her shoulders, possessive and protective all at once. "I will find who did this," he promised, his breath hot against her ear. "And they will beg for death before I'm done." A knock at the door interrupted them. Marco, Damiano's most trusted lieutenant, entered with a tablet in his hand. "Boss, we found something." Valeria watched as Damiano's expression darkened while reviewing the evidence. His jaw clenched, and for a moment she saw the monster everyone feared, the ruthless Mafia boss who'd built his empire on blood and violence. "Elena," he spat out the name like poison. "Your friend from the clinic." The revelation hit Valeria like a physical blow. Elena had been there from the beginning, had helped her survive on the streets. The betrayal cut deep, leaving her breathless. "No," she whispered. But even as she denied it, memories started falling into place. Elena's strange questions, her convenient appearances, the way she always seemed to know where Valeria would be. Damiano's hand tightened on her shoulder. "She's been feeding information to our enemies since the beginning, since before you saved my life." Tears burned in Valeria's eyes, but she blinked them back. She'd learned that crying didn't solve anything in this world. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Because they paid her," Damiano answered coldly. "And because she thought she could use you to destroy me." The weight of those words settled over them. Valeria had been a pawn all along, but not just in Damiano's game, in everyone's. His phone buzzed, and his expression turned lethal. "They found her! She's trying to leave the city." Valeria's heart raced. "What are you going to do?" Damiano's dark eyes met hers in the window's reflection. "What I always do to people who try to take what's mine." He pulled her around to face him, his grip firm but not painful. "You're coming with me. It's time you see exactly what happens to those who betray us." The word "us" wasn't lost on Valeria. Somewhere along the way, she'd stopped being just his prisoner. She'd become part of his world, part of him. And despite everything, the violence, the danger, the darkness, she couldn't imagine being anywhere else. "Okay," she whispered, meeting his gaze. "Show me." A dangerous smile curved Damiano's lips as he pulled her closer. "That's my girl," he murmured, pressing a hard kiss to her temple. "Remember, you're mine, and I protect what's mine no matter the cost." The night stretched ahead of them, promising more blood, more violence, more choices that would further bind Valeria to Damiano's dark world. But as she followed him out of the study, she realized she'd already made her choice. She belonged to him, just as he belonged to her, two broken pieces fitting perfectly in their beautiful, terrible world. Following the dark final confrontation, weeks passed in a blur of rebuilding and healing. The mansion's atmosphere had shifted, no longer suffocating with tension, but humming with a different kind of energy. Power, yes, but also something deeper. Valeria stood at the window of what was now their bedroom, watching the sun set over the manicured gardens. Behind her, she heard Damiano's familiar footsteps, steady and sure. His presence filled the room before he even touched her. "You're thinking too hard again," he said, his voice low and possessive as he wrapped his arms around her waist. She leaned back against his chest, allowing herself to feel safe in his embrace. It had taken time to accept this, to accept him, with all his darkness and his light. "I was just remembering where we started. Me, a beggar on the street. You, dying from poison." His grip tightened. "And now, look at us." He turned her to face him, his dark eyes intense. "You saved my life that night. But you've saved me in so many other ways since then." Valeria reached up, tracing the scar on his jaw, a reminder of their final battle. "Your enemies thought I was your weakness." A dangerous smile curved his lips. they learned their mistake. He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "You're my strength, Valeria, my queen." She felt the familiar flutter in her chest, fear mixed with excitement, love tangled with danger. This was their reality now. She had chosen this life, chosen him, with all its complications. "Are you happy?" he asked, studying her face with that penetrating gaze that still made her breath catch. "I'm yours," she answered simply, because it was the truth. She had fought it for so long, but in the end, belonging to Damiano De Luca meant belonging to herself in a way she never had before. He pulled her closer, his kiss fierce and possessive. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were dark with promise. "Forever, my love. No one will ever take you from me." Valeria smiled, knowing that this was their happy ending, not perfect, not pure, but perfectly them. A love forged in darkness, tempered by danger, and made stronger by every battle they'd fought together. "Forever," she agreed, and felt his heart beat stronger against hers. In the fading light of day, they stood together, the Mafia king and his queen, bound by blood, choice, and a love that had transformed them both. Their story wasn't a fairy tale, but it was theirs, written in scars and sacrifice, in passion and protection. And as night fell over their empire, they both knew that whatever came next, they would face it together, because some loves are worth burning the world for, and theirs was a fire that would never die. The end.